What's going on, everybody? It's Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm super excited to have Kevin on with us. Kevin is one of our rock star clients who just overcame a bunch of obstacles. And I would just say, there were a lot of things that were working against him on his journey to investment banking, but he didn't let that stop him and ended up just totally crushing the recruiting process, got multiple offers, and he's just one of the most positive guys I've ever met. So I want to get him on here, talk to you guys about his experience, how he was able to do what he did, and hopefully just, give you guys some inspiration and maybe even some insight on what are some of the things that you could do on your own and maybe go out and implement it. So Kevin, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, Sam. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we dive into your story, which I think is quite amazing, can you just maybe introduce yourself to our listeners so they kind of get a sense for who you are?
All right, cool. Well, good morning, afternoon, wherever you guys are, evening. My name is Kevin Jones Jr. I am a second-year MBA candidate studying at the #1 ranked historically Black college and university in America. That's Florida A&M University down here in Tallahassee, Florida. But I'm originally born and raised in Miami, Florida. And I'm excited about being able to talk a little bit about how the program was able to help me realize a 15-year dream.
That's awesome. Yeah, we see the FAMU pride in your background there. So
Absolutely, I'm a rep.
So let's go back to the beginning. I mean, you mentioned it's a 15-year dream, meaning you've been wanting to get into IB for 15 years. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. The seed of investment banking was first planted in me when I was a junior in high school. Some people had no idea what they wanted to do in the 11th grade, but that's what I kind of always wanted to do when I was exposed to it. Yeah. It was the most prestigious career. It was one of the most rewarding financially careers. Yeah. It was challenging. And it was where the best seemed to go after business school and then college. So that was where I sighted my eyes back in high school.
So most people are probably wondering, like, okay, so you realize you want to do banking in junior year of high school. Mm-hmm. Then what happened for, like, why did it take 15 years? Because that's a big detour, right? Like most people, if they decide in junior year of high school, it'll take them, 3 to 4 years, right? Or whatever, 4 to 5 years to get into banking. So you're saying it took you 15. Like, fill us in on the Cliff Notes version of what happened in those 15 years.
Well, guys, I had, like Sam said, a big detour. Once I graduated high school, I started at the University of Florida and I did a couple different things. I tried my hands at entrepreneurship, particularly network marketing, ministry. I served in the U.S. Army for about 8 years in the reserve component. I had a tour in Afghanistan in 2012. And my last profession, I worked in the Florida Department of Corrections. So I just I was married in the process. So I kind of had different responsibilities, different journeys that kind of took me off course, if you will. Yeah. And then I kind of late 2017 made a decision to make a hard push and pivot back to finance.
Okay. That's one of the most diverse and interesting backgrounds that we'll probably ever find in a student inside of Wall Street Mastermind. I mean, you said entrepreneurship, ministry. I think you're the first Wall Street Mastermind student that's been in ministry, that's for sure. Served in the Army, so thank you for your service. And then the Department of Corrections, so that's like the state prison, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, like, none of that stuff has any relevance to finance or investment banking.
Correct.
How did you go from like, I don't even know. How did you go from ministry? How did you end up in ministry? Like, if you knew you want to, if you knew you wanted to do investment banking, I guess my biggest question is this: you knew you wanted to do investment banking
Mm-hmm.
in high school. Why didn't you just try to go into investment banking in college? Like, why did you do all these other like 4 or 5 other things in between?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what was the thought process there?
Yeah, I think where I was when I was much younger, my mindset was, I kind of wanted to work and have my own, start my own business, start my own company. So that's why I kind of tried my hand at that. When that was not as successful and I didn't launch as fast as I wanted it to launch, I then re-engaged in life and in school full time. And then I started a family. That was kind of a big transition for me. And then with that, I kind of put everything to the side in terms of me being able to fully dedicate and commit myself, even though I didn't have to a career in investment banking. So that's kind of from there where I bounced around into different professions that I had an interest in, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't my lifelong dream.
Got it. And then, so why in 2017, then, after going through all of this, why did you finally say, okay, like, I'm going to go back and pursue my original dream? Because I would think that most people, if they've been thinking about something for 15 years and they haven't done it, they're probably just not going to do it, you know?
Yes,
And you've done all these other things along the way. You started a family. Like, banking, let's be honest, is not the most uh, family friendly career out there, right?
absolutely.
Work-life
Hmm.
balance. So, like, what was the spark that made you say, you know what, I'm not ready to give up on this yet?
Yeah. I think I got encouragement from family and friends that were telling me, hey, as my family dynamics were changing towards the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. They were encouraging me like, hey, you can do this. Why not? And I think that's why I enrolled in the first master's program where I first earned a master's of science and finance from CSU, Colorado State University. That didn't help much in terms of getting into investment banking, but I think that was a big shift for me in terms of pursuing, okay, now is the time, and it's not too late to do this. It's never too late after all those years. I still felt I could do it.
Yeah. So your
Mhm.
family kind of encouraged you to do this. Do you have like family members that were in finance or working, something related to Wall Street, or
No,
do they understand this field that you were trying to get into and they could help you with it, or were you kind of just doing all this on your own?
no, I was mostly doing it on my own. They still really don't understand. But they knew I wasn't happy. They
Mm.
knew I was living beneath my potential and my ability. So they was like, hey, go for it. Now's the time. You're not getting any younger. And I did.
Nice. Okay. So you went into your master's in finance program at Colorado State. Like, did you go and take on that degree with the intention of leveraging that to get into investment banking? Like, was that the intention going in?
Yes, yes, that was definitely the intention. Because I have an undergraduate degree in biblical studies.
Okay.
Um, I didn't have a finance background academically, so I thought it was important to, number one, learn finance from the academic point of view,
Yeah.
and number two, just show my commitment and my interest in finance with a master's degree,
Yeah.
but not knowing that I need to bridge that with some actual internship experience.
Right. So you said you came out of Colorado State. I mean, obviously you got the degree,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't get into banking. Did you try to apply to banking jobs and stuff while you were in that program and just didn't pan out? Like,
Yeah.
were you able to get interviews, or like, is it like I couldn't get interviews at all, or maybe I got interviews but I couldn't pass interviews, or like where were you kind of stuck?
Well, I definitely applied more towards because I didn't know what I was doing. So I kind of applied a couple months prior to completing the degree, hoping that would be enough to get me in the door. But turns out that wasn't enough to get me in the door. And, no response from pretty much all of the firms that I had applied to.
Okay. Like what type of firms are you applying to? Are these like the Bulge back end, like the banks that everyone has heard of, or like what type of banks are you applying to?
Yeah, it was definitely at that time the more well-known firms, the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, the Bank of America's of that time.
Got it. Okay. So then what happened after that then? You graduated from Colorado State. You've been applying to all these banks that you thought this degree will help you get into. You're not getting any responses to any of these applications. So then what did you do after that?
So I got the brilliant idea. Well, I need another degree. The first one didn't work. Maybe the second one will.
You just like paying tuition. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I just got more in debt. That's it. Let's go put on another couple $30,000 in debt. So that's essentially what I did. And I was working full time. I need to say that in full disclosure, as for the Department of Corrections as a classification officer at that time.
Yeah.
So it might not have been as convenient to get up and do an internship, but I kind of said, okay, well, I'm going for an MBA this time. That should better position me.
Yeah. Okay, so you're like, Master in Finance can work. Maybe what I need is an MBA. Okay, got it.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's how you ended up at FAMU, basically. Right?
Absolutely. I kind of did some research on the school. I saw that they had, me being an African American, they had a track record of placement of black students on careers in finance. So what I didn't know, it wasn't quite what I wanted to do, but they were on quote unquote Wall Street. So I kind of had to learn, like, there's a difference between, just general work on Wall Street and investment banking.
Are you saying like they have alumni on Wall Street, which is what drew you to the school, but the alumni were mostly working like mid office and back office roles as opposed to front office roles? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Or in product groups that I wasn't necessarily interested in.
Okay, got it. I mean, that's I think that happens a lot, right? Which is to someone who's maybe not super knowledgeable about the inner workings of Wall Street, which I would say back then, at least, you would fall under that category. For the outsider that's looking in, they might think that, hey, Wall Street is Wall Street or finance is finance. And a lot of times, like, I get LinkedIn messages from students and you can tell they just like, they don't know the difference between investment banking versus risk versus like, finance versus like, there's all these different
equity research
versus all these different departments, right? And they kind of think like, I mean, the worst is when like they think that like you ask them like, oh, so what kind of relevant experience do you have? And this is my favorite when they say, oh yeah, like I've been a bank teller at like the Bank of America Canada. And it's like, yes, that's in the banking industry, that's in the financial services industry, but it's like so far from what you would be doing as an investment banker, right? Like those guys don't get paid like anything, right? Versus versus an investment banking job is like, it's one of the highest paying jobs out there, right? And so I think like there's just more education that needs to happen so that people are they have more awareness around what they're getting themselves into, because we're talking about people's careers, right? Like this is no joke. Like people are making huge life decisions. In your case, spending, I don't know how many thousands of dollars to go get an MBA because you thought that, that would be a great way for you to get into banking, right? It ends up not being that. And it all worked out in the end, but like, if we're being honest, and like, did not align with your intention, at least. Right? And so not that the school is not a good school. I'm sure the school is good at a lot of things,
Absolutely.
but there's no school that's good at everything, right?
Of
And
course. Yeah.
of course, if you're gonna pay that much money to go get a degree, whether it's a master's in finance or MBA, ideally you want to pick a school that is going to be good at the thing that you need it to be good at, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so you end up at FAMU. You are working part time and going to school part time. It sounds like. Um, what kind of where did you go from there? Then, like, did you have? Well, I was going to ask, did you have a lot of resources at your school that could help you get into banking? But I feel like based on what you just said, I probably know the answer already. Like, what did you find after you actually showed up?
When I actually showed up, there was an alumni network I was able to connect to. It's called the Chief Financiers Officers, great group, of bankers that work on some very prestigious firms, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan. We have a couple there, and in different areas. Truist. I was able to find a alumna from there as well. So, but none of them were actually in the areas where I wanted to work in investment banking.
Yeah.
So there really wasn't. Plus, this was COVID environment, right?
Yeah.
So there really wasn't much going on campus.
Yeah.
And even when the recruiters came, they didn't really come recruiting for those types of coverages and product groups.
Right. What did they recruit? What were some of the teams they were recruiting for?
Commercial banking, wealth management, and sometimes some accounting and finance roles.
Yeah.
And even some IT roles as well.
Okay, got it. So you talk to these alumni. They're not in investment banking. They're maybe in other divisions or other parts of these firms. So what did they tell you? Or like, were they able to help you, or were they like, sorry, bud, like not my thing? Or like, what was the outcome?
Yeah, they were very encouraging, but I mean, the extent of the help, to be honest with you, it was just resume revision. That was probably much the extent of it. I would send over my resume, they would tweak it. They would say, hey, apply to more than one. But that was probably the extent of it, to be honest.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So that's what.
And I forgot. And then they'll say, hey, apply to this role. It's open. That part too. Hey, apply here, apply there.
Yeah.
That type of stuff.
Okay. So this was like what, 2020 when you started at FAMU, maybe?
Yep, 2020 fall. And 2020 fall and spring, which is when I really kind of started making the push in spring.
Right. Okay. So you joined FAMU 2020 fall. Then you start networking with alumni. They give you a little bit of help, but really not too much beyond resume and things like that, and just words of encouragement. What else did you try to do on your own? Like, how were you going about this recruiting process? Were you, I don't know, reading the interview guides, or taking financial modeling courses, or I don't know, I'm trying to think of all the other things that people typically do. Like, what were you doing to try to figure this stuff out?
Well, I'm a reader, so I kind of read personal books, personal finance books that was interesting in me, fundamental analysis for dummies. I got a whole list of them, but I didn't even know about the guides, to be honest with you.
Wow. Okay.
The Wall Street Oasis and the 400 question guide. I didn't really even know about that until spring.
Okay.
And I learned that from other college students who weren't even in, and enrolled in my school, who was in an organization that I'm in called BLK Capital. So I didn't even know about the guides and the nature of the questions that'll be asked.
Interesting. Okay, so that's actually pretty rare for us to hear that from like a Wall Street Mastermind clients. Like usually our students, even by the time they come to Wall Street Mastermind, like they've long known about the Wall Street Oasis guys and the Breaking Wall Street guys, because that's just like industry standard. Everybody has those guides, right?
Man, if I knew those guys existed, I would have used that instead of the Masters of Science in Finance. Like I said, I didn't know. I just didn't know.
But that's like that just goes to show, though. I think the school and the environment the environment that you were in, it just really wasn't conducive to investment banking. It sounds like not anybody's fault, but like it sounds like none of your classmates were trying to break into investment banking.
Mm-hmm.
None of your classmates were using these guys, because that's usually how people hear about it, is that their friends all use it, their upperclassmen use this. So then when they go ask them for advice, they're like, oh yeah, this is what I did. You should just use this. And that's how you find out. And that's how you found out about it through BOK, is all your friends in BOK capital management were using this.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's another great point, which is like, I think being in the right environment can make a huge difference, because
absolutely critical.
It's the difference between you being in the know versus you being completely ignorant, to no fault of your own, but just like you don't know what you don't know, right?
Absolutely critical. I mean, that, like, great point. That community is important, and like you said, it's no fault of the school or the students. It's just when you're in an environment where kind of like you have a unique interest, and nobody else really shares that interest. You don't know kind of what you're doing and how to go about it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you found, okay, so then you joined BOK somewhere along the way, which is great. That's a great organization, right? And it's probably up to that point, probably your most relevant experience as far as investment banking goes, right? You meet a bunch of students in BOK who are probably all trying to get into investment banking. They show you the interview guides. So then you probably start reading those, right?
Correct.
And then how was that going? I guess I'm trying to get from at that point in time to I think you joined Wall Street Mastermind about 6 months ago now, like March of 2021. We're in September now. Like, what was it that made you say, okay, I'm going to go join something like Wall Street Mastermind, as opposed to just, continuing to do whatever it is that you were already doing on your own, right? Whether it's using these guides, or I don't know, getting help from people in BLK, or whatever resources you already had at your disposal. Because, I mean, there's a lot of free resources out there, right? Why join something like this?
I think with me, I'm a systems man. I'm a process guy. And I kind of like something that I can follow systematically. And I first heard about your program actually listening to a podcast. And I listened to another podcast, listened to another podcast, listened to another podcast. And I said, hey, let me book this call just to see what this is about. So it seemed to be a program. Number one, I was looking for results, 90% placement rate. You gotta have some bad self-esteem to think you'll fall into the 10%, who can't get placed. So I said, okay, I mean, I know it's a program and I have to put in the work, but if it is as good as they say it is, I'm willing to commit and put into the work. So, because, they could, the college students, they were sending me 5-10 different guides at a time. And that was helpful, but it was like, okay, where do I start? What do I need to learn the most? What's most important with my time? And what I love about your program is focus and it's accelerated. Like, these are the concepts and the principles that you need to learn, and that are going to be asked most commonly. And from the conceptual point of view. And not just, hey, know how to answer these 400 random questions in these 4 different areas.
Right. Yeah, we're not having you just like memorize stuff by
Yeah.
brute force and then hoping, like, fingers crossed, like, let's hope they only ask these questions that I've already memorized, which will never
Yeah.
happen. But you're
Hmm.
actually learning the concepts behind the questions so that doesn't matter what they ask you, you got to be able to basically field their questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it made a big difference. I felt very prepared every
Yeah.
interview I went in.
Yeah. Um, I mean, it sounds like though at the time when you joined this program, because you had to pay for your MSF, your Master's in
Hmm.
Finance, then you said you took on even more debt to pay for Florida A&M, and
Hmm.
so you were probably already up to your neck in terms of student loans,
Yeah.
and so it wasn't like because a lot of people say, oh yeah, like the only people that join Wall Street Mastermind are like privileged rich kids or whatever, right? Like that's not you though, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like this Wall Street Mastermind was like a sizable investment for you, I'm guessing.
Absolutely.
Right? And
Hmm.
you pay for this on your own with like
Hmm.
without your parents' help or anybody, like there was no one helping you with this investment. Right.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So I guess my question is like I want to kind of understand your psyche a little bit, which is I feel like a lot of people, if they were in your situation, maybe they're older, they're not like the prototypical
Hmm.
candidate for banking. Um, they don't see a lot of people like themselves, in banking and
Hmm.
like which like let's not understate the importance of that because
Yeah.
it does impact your belief, right? Like
Hmm.
if like when I was a kid, I wanted to play in the NBA. That was my dream, right?
Hmm.
And there were no Asians in the NBA, and I'm like as a little boy, I'm like, okay, how come there's no one that looks like me in the NBA? Like it probably means that it's not possible for me to play in the NBA.
Yeah.
Right? Of
Hmm.
course, it's possible. Jeremy Lin has proven that since then, but that was way later, right? But
Yeah.
still, like, my point is though, like, it does impact your belief. But like, I feel like most people, what I find to be amazing about you is that most people in your position, they would they would probably come from a place of scarcity because they're like, oh, I have
Hmm.
no money. I'm already so in debt. I can't spend more
Hmm.
money on something like this, especially if they don't have conviction or certainty
Yeah.
that this program could work for them. I know you're sitting there saying, listening to this podcast and saying, hey, you got to have pretty low self-esteem to think that you'd be in the other 10%. But at the same
Hmm.
time, it's like when you look around, no one from FAMU is in investment banking.
True.
There's not that many people on Wall Street that, look and talk like you. Like, I I think most people would not have a lot of confidence,
Yeah.
and they would think that they're most likely going to fall in the other 10%, and because of that, they would think, well, I would be stupid to spend this amount of money when I'm already this in debt on something that's a low probability,
Yeah.
right? So why is it that I mean, obviously you didn't think that way, or we wouldn't be
Yeah.
sitting here talking today. But why is it that you don't think that way? Is it just because you're just a positive person? Because I mean, having gotten to know you over the last 6 months, like I said, I feel like you're one of the most positive, just human beings that I know in general in terms of like your
Thanks, Sam.
attitude. Yeah, but like, what was going through your head though? Because this is like, I think to you, this decision seemed very logical and is not a big deal. But
Yeah.
I think we're sitting where I'm sitting, having seen so many students and having talked to literally thousands of students who have considered joining this program. Some have joined, some haven't joined. I can sit here and tell you right now that I think you did something that a lot of people in your position would not have done. Right.
Mhm.
So walk us through that. Like, why did you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really good question. And to answer it very quickly, just two things. First and foremost, is more important than the second one is, I'm a man of faith, Sam, and that's where it starts with me.
You were in ministry. That makes sense.
Yeah, right. So I'm a man of faith. I have to see the glass half full and not half empty. I have to, you know, um, and number two, when I was on the phone, working at the prison, I was calling the career kind of advisor or counselor for the School of Business here. Yeah. And, I was saying, hey, how certain is it that I'm, if I resign from my job and relocate up here and study full time, to switch careers, how certain am I to get an internship? She said, we will facilitate career fairs twice a year. We will introduce you to companies, but we can't guarantee you anything. And I remember verbatim, my exact words were, well, I have to bet on myself. I got to bet on myself. And that's what his program was, this 2-year, which turns into 3 years, actually, MBA program, where it's a full 100% complete bet on myself. It was like, either I make this work or I go back to what I was doing. No, I don't want to go back to what I'm doing. And it was either this or I go back to law school and try to find something in law school.
More school. More school. Wow.
So if you compare the investment of law school and everything else with the resources that I had to use to invest in the program and to find and discover and make an exchange, it's a no-brainer. It wasn't a hard decision for me. And like I said, that 90% placement rate, that did it for me. That did it.
Well, did you have any skepticism? Because a lot of people hear the 90% success rate and they're like, no, that can't be, that's too good to be true. This guy's, a scammer, whatever. He's lying. You didn't have any doubts?
No, I mean, listen, you don't know, right? There's just certain things you don't know. I tried to do my homework. The introductory call that I had was very open. I could ask any questions. So there's always a possibility. But through all the client calls and, everyone does their research, and on the web and I was like, okay, this is a legitimate business. It's placing college students at some of the best firms. I had heard different client interviews as well. Some of them were coming from accounting backgrounds. Some of them were MBA students like myself, and some of them were undergrads who got started very late in recruiting and was still able to be successful. Yeah. So I was like, okay, that's enough for me.
Yeah, that's great, man. So you bet on yourself. You're like, I don't want to go back to where I'm working now, which is the state prison, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I'm grateful for a job now. I'm grateful for a job, but I knew I could do better. And that really wasn't what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what your role there was there exactly, but I just imagine it's not probably the best work environment that you want to be in for the rest of your life or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
And I also imagine, I don't know, I've never worked in a place like that, but I imagine the pay is not very good, and in terms of being able to take care of your family and things like that, there's a huge difference, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I know we spent a lot of time on your story, on your journey leading up to Wall Street Mastermind, because I just think it's so fascinating. There's so many things to unpack there. But then after you join Wall Street Mastermind, in the last 6 months or so, obviously a lot has happened. But what did you do inside of Wall Street Mastermind? What did you find to be the most helpful for you? What were some of the things that you did in Wall Street Mastermind where it's looking back on it in hindsight, you can say, you know what, there's no way I could have done this on my own. Was there anything like that? Because that's the question that people always have is well, what's the point of doing something like this? Can't I just Google everything or, look stuff up on YouTube? Isn't everything already online? Everything already on Google? What could you possibly need from Wall Street Mastermind? Can you talk about your experience a little bit?
Yeah, for me, Sam, it was everything from start to finish. So the very first thing that the program teaches and walks you through is how do you market yourself, right? Everyone knows you're going to have to network in investment banking. How do you get someone to respond to your email? How do you get someone to answer your call and even want to talk to you? So you have this resume service, craft the resume, and we work on the LinkedIn. So that's the first block. The second block is how do you network? You know, who do you talk to in a firm? It's not random. You know, I had to learn that too. It's not random. And there's a certain type of structured conversation you want to have when you talk to investment bankers. And you don't and another thing you taught me is the conversation isn't the same depending upon the banker and their seniority, right? You have to fit the conversation for the seniority of the banker. How do I learn the network? Okay, got that down. Then, okay, how do you interview? You know, there's two types of questions. You either have the technical questions that is on all of the academic stuff, the accounting, valuation, merger mathematics, and the LBO, you know, the foundations of that. And you do it in an accelerated pace. And then the behavioral questions. And that was very key. That was very key because I've had interviews where that's the majority of the questions. You know, and there is a good behavioral answer and there is an okay behavioral answer. And the team that you assemble and put together, they help us craft that as well. So all of those things are so important. And it's all in the program, and it's just the community as well, all the other people that you become a part of, the Wolfpack family, that helps along the way too.
Which we talked about earlier, like environment is important. If you are surrounded by, you know, people who are trying to do what you do at your school, and you're surrounded by people who are in the know about like whatever recruiting timelines or resources that are available or internship opportunities or what questions get asked by which firm, like those are all advantages you would have by being a part of a network like a Wall Street Mastermind, or, you know, like for a lot of students, it's like maybe they have like an investment banking club at some Uber target school where everybody is just like very in a loop. It's kind of like that, right? You didn't have that at school, and so you went out and found that community for yourself, and put yourself in the environment that you needed to be in. And so that makes a lot of sense. And I think you gave a really good overview of like all the things that we kind of touched on in the program, from, you know, your application materials, like resume, cover letter.
I failed to mention something too, Sam. The office hours, right? So anyone that's listening to this, I don't want them to have the impression, okay, this is just something that you do on a computer with no personal touch. No, there's mock interviews, there's office hours, there's, hey, if there's anything you're seeing, you know, in your training that you don't understand, like there's a team of coaches, including Sam leading the way, that to get on the phone with you, hey, and explain this technical concept. So that's critical too. That's really what distinguishes, I think, Wall Street Mastermind from anything else that you could possibly be a part of and practice.
I was gonna say, like, because you gave a good overview of all the different parts of recruiting that we touch on, from the application and networking, the technicals to behaviorals. But I was gonna ask, like, what's the difference between what we do and just you doing it on your own? But it sounds like you kind of just answered it, which is having a team of coaches who are available 24/7 on demand anytime you have a question about anything, and to just be able to talk through things with them so that you're not kind of like trying to figure everything on your own and trying to guess at what the right answer is.
Wall Street Mastermind will stay with you till you convert. That's, for me, that's priceless. For me, that's priceless. You can't pay for someone, you can't pay enough money for someone to stay with you until you're successful. And ensure that you are successful. That's what I call an invested interest.
Right.
You know, so for me, that's priceless.
No, I think that's absolutely right. Like, we're one of the only companies that I've seen that don't put like a term limit, or, you know, in terms of like how much help you can get from us, or I think a lot of companies out there are very transactional about it. It's like, okay, every additional hour we spend with you, you got to pay us X. Right? For us, it's just like, no, like once you're in, you're in, and once you're in, Like it's our responsibility, well, and yours. It's both of our responsibility to
Mm-hmm.
do what we can to get you the job, and we're not going to stop until you get the job, or until you tell us like, "Hey, I don't want to do this anymore. I give up." Right?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, and most people that join our programs, they're not quitters, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. So you came in, you worked on all this stuff, and like, how did the recruiting process go for you then? Like, you this time around, because you mentioned before in college you submit a bunch of applications, you don't hear back from any of them. Like, what was the experience like for you this time? Like, do you have a rough sense for, like, for example, how many firms did you end up applying to, and
Mm-hmm.
like how many places you get interviews from, and who'd you end up getting offers from? Like, can you kind of walk people through that funnel?
Yeah, so I think in total, so I'm an MBA candidate. Typically MBA recruiting doesn't start until the fall.
Yeah.
But the rush and the race for talent pushes everything back. So
Yeah.
I ended up, thank God for Wall Street Mastermind and the preparation that I was doing, because I ended up having interviews a lot earlier than several months earlier than the traditional recruiting season.
Yeah.
So I would say I probably applied to, because most of the applications weren't open, maybe 5, 6, 7
Okay.
firms, and I ended up getting 3 interviews, 3 different firms. TD Securities was the first one.
Yep.
I received an offer from them.
Yep.
The second one was UBS. I received an offer from them, Bulge bracket. And the third one was Bank of America. I received an offer from them as well. So I ended up selecting and committing to UBS.
Yeah.
But man, those are results you could only dream of coming from. So
Yeah. So you went 3 for 3 on your interviews, and
yes.
you got, I mean, you applied to 5 to 7 firms. So you got about interviews from just under to just over half of them, depending on what that number is. Let's just call it half. It's pretty solid. Like, to go from no interviews whatsoever, the first time you applied on your own, to getting half of the interviews you applied for, and then more importantly, acing every single interview that you got and getting those offers. And to be able to choose from the 3 offers that you had, like, I mean, those are, I mean, UBS and Bank of America, both bulge bracket banks, and then TD, it's a great middle market bank as well. Definitely all 3 of them, I would consider to be very reputable and prestigious. So that's quite the accomplishment. I mean, I guess ultimately, like, when you're choosing between firms, like, what goes into that decision? Like, how do you choose between all these different great options? I mean, you can't really go wrong, but like, what goes into that decision?
Well, for me, it's prestige, and notoriety of each firm, because I know in our industry, sometimes you're judged by the firms that you work for,
Yeah.
At some point there is I guess maybe a leveling out of the same skill sets across the board.
Yeah.
But certain firms have better deal flow. They have better compensation, and they just position you better for if you want to transition into another vertical within the financial services industry, like private equity or venture capital, or anything that you may want to pivot to. Certain firms does offer better opportunities.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you go from, I think we had a conversation about this before, which I found to be quite amazing, but you went from working at the Florida Department of Corrections to working at, or soon to be working in investment banking, right? Um, how, like, what is the percentage increase, or I don't know if this is percentage, or how many how many times are you increasing your annual compensation by making that switch?
Not including bonus, it's over 4 times.
Not including bonus.
Not including annual bonus. Now, if I throw the bonus in, which could be 50 to 100% of the base, that'll be astronomical, but just on base alone, it's over 4 times what I was making as a classification officer in the Florida Department of Corrections.
Wow. Okay.
So that's kind of like night and day. That's a
If you
huge.
add another 50 to 100%, depending on your performance, obviously, then there will be 6 to 8 times, I guess.
Yes, correct.
If you're like the worst associate in the world and you only get a 50% bonus, you're still making 6 times more than what you were making before.
Okay. Correct.
I mean, that is the ROI for you betting on yourself, right? That is the ROI for you investing in yourself. And I mean, not even just the investment in Wall Street Mastermind, but obviously you invested a lot of time and effort and money to get your MSF, to get your MBA, and all of those investments are included in that.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you got all these degrees with the intention of making the switch to investment banking. If you hadn't successfully made that switch, it would have been a very expensive investment. But because you did what you had to do and you got the help you needed to get, and you successfully made the switch, now this is something that's going to pay dividends for hopefully the rest of your career, right? I mean, regardless of whether you stay in banking or not. I mean, even if you stay in banking, obviously you continue down this trajectory, right? And your pay will continue to increase as you become more senior. But even if you leave banking, like, I left banking after a few years, but I can honestly say all the subsequent jobs that I had that I exited into, whether it's private equity or tech or, all the other jobs after that, my compensation was anchored off of what I previously made, right? Because that's what employers do is when they're trying to hire you and they need to figure out what kind of package to offer you, they always want to know, well, how much were you making at your last job? And then they try to beat that by, some amount, right? So if you're not making that much at the last job, if you're coming from, the Department of Corrections or whatever, like they only have to pay you a little bit more than that. But if you're coming from banking, they had to pay you more than that, right? And
Absolutely.
That's where we're saying like you're taking your trajectory from maybe this type of trajectory to, you're elevating the slope of that. Right, which in the beginning maybe doesn't seem like a big difference, but over time that gap becomes wider and wider, right?
I heard a podcast where you was explaining that concept, and I got it. Like, wow, it will grow exponentially based upon where you start in your career.
It's not linear. It's not linear, right? I mean, people always like to complain like, oh, like the rich people just keep getting richer. Well, there's a reason. It's because the game, I hate to say it, but the game is kind of rigged that way. That like the more money you have, the easier it is for you to make money. You can go out and invest. You have all this extra disposable income versus people who are just living paycheck to paycheck. Like they're not thinking about investing.
Correct.
The only money they're making is the hourly wage that they're making. And I mean, you only have so many hours in a day. What are you supposed to do? Right. And so this is why I laugh. Like sometimes I read some really ignorant comments online and forums or internet where like some, college student who thinks he's like super smart will say things like, I don't want to do investment banking because like if you calculate how many hours investment banking analysts have to work, like the hourly wage is worse than McDonald's. And I'm like, all right, well, you go work at McDonald's and let me know how that works out. Like, let me know how that works out in 10 years, like maybe you could be the store manager. I'm not trying to be condescending. There's nothing wrong with McDonald's, but I'm just saying,
of course,
when you think about your career, you can't be short-sighted. You can't just think about like, oh, I'm only making like $20 or $25 an hour in the beginning. It's like, no, like think long-term, think like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 40 years, like what's going to happen down the road and how is that going to affect your ability to provide the type of lifestyle that you want, not just for yourself, but also for other people around you that you love and care about, for your family, your spouse, your kids, your parents, your siblings, like whoever, right? You can only really think about that stuff though if you have the ability to provide for those people. A lot of people can't even think about that because they're just worried about even providing for themselves, right? And that's a horrible place to be, right? So anyway, man, like, I mean, I know we've been going for a long time, but I think that you really deserve a lot of recognition again, because I think like, I have a really there's a saying that I really like, which is exceptional people do exceptional things, right?
Mhm.
If you look at the people that have a lot of success, or if I look at the people that I know that have a lot of success, pretty much every single one of them at some point in time was willing to do something that other people weren't willing to do. They were willing to make a bet that other people weren't willing to bet, that other people weren't willing to make, or they were willing to just like kind of go against the grain and like
Mhm.
do something that most people wouldn't have thought of doing or wouldn't have dared to do, right? And it makes sense because if you just do what everyone else is already comfortable doing, what is really going to set you apart from everyone else? Like what why do
Mhm.
you deserve to be more successful than other people when you're just doing the exact same things?
Absolutely.
That's just not how it works,
Mhm.
right? Like people are like, oh, Jeff Bezos, he's so successful. Like Mark Zuckerberg, he's so successful. Like all these people, Elon Musk, he's so successful. Like, you know how much risk those guys took to start a company?
Mhm.
Jeff Bezos like left a job as a vice president at a hedge fund to go start
Mhm.
an online bookstore. I mean, people probably thought he was crazy,
Yeah.
right? Mark Zuckerberg dropped out of Harvard. He dropped out of Harvard to start an online social media company, which was not a thing back then, right?
Mhm.
It's almost like the more insane the thing you're doing seems, the bigger the outcome, the more spectacular the outcome. Of course, probably also a lot more risk and a lot more failure, right? But
Mhm.
regardless, my point is like everybody wants to like always play it safe. They want like high returns with no risk. There's
Mhm.
no such thing in life when it comes to investing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's an immutable law of investing, which is, you know, typically you're going to find high risk, high reward, low risk, low reward.
Mhm.
But sometimes once in a while, you find that asymmetrical investment, you find that investment with the asymmetrical risk reward profile because there's something that you understand that the rest of the market doesn't understand yet, where you can
Yeah.
actually find an opportunity where the upside far exceeds the downside, right?
Mhm.
The decision you made to join Wall Street Mastermind. If you think about the downside is okay. I joined this program and it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. All right, and I spent a little bit of money on it, which is really not that much more in the grand scheme of things, considering how much you had already spent on schooling and education
Yeah.
and all your master's degrees. That was the downside. And then
Mhm.
there's a cap on that downside. What's the
Yeah.
upside? Well, the upside is I get a job that's going to pay me 6 to 8 times more what I'm making now and for the rest of my life. That's the upside, right? And then when you
Huge.
compare those two things, it's like, what's a no brainer? And then the other thing you got
Mhm.
to factor into account too is like the probability of each of those outcomes happening. What do I think
Mhm.
is the probability that I'm going to hit the downside scenario? And what do I
Mhm.
think is the probability that I'm gonna, make it out and get the offer that I want? And then you probability weighted, and then it becomes even more skewed towards the
Yes.
upside,
Mhm.
right? Because when you were doing your homework on Wall Street Mastermind, you said, okay, they have a 90% success rate, and you thought it's more likely that you're going to be part of the 90% than part of the 10%, right?
Mhm.
Of course, nothing's guaranteed. There's no such thing as 100%, but that's pretty much as good as it gets,
Pretty much.
right?
Mhm.
And so I just always encourage people. It's like, look, you got to make these decisions with. You want to become an investment banker, you got to learn to think like an investor. You got to
Mhm.
learn how the greatest investors in the world think, which is they have an investor's mindset. They evaluate every decision through risk and reward. Is
Mhm.
this is this a risk worth taking? Everything you do has a risk. You
Yeah.
decide to cross the street today, there's a risk of you getting hit by a car. You're not going to cross the street. Well, you got to cross the street, right, to get to where you want to go. But like every decision we make every day comes with a risk, but you have to decide if that's a risk worth taking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for those people that are like, well, I'm only going to do this if it's guaranteed. Well, then you're not going to do a whole lot in life because there's not a whole lot in life that's guaranteed.
Absolutely.
You find me something in life that's an amazing outcome that's guaranteed, that doesn't require you to put in any work and doesn't require you to take any chances, doesn't require you to take any calculated risks, then let me know and I have a bridge to sell you. There's no such thing, right?
Absolutely.
So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, I get very passionate about this stuff. I just think that,
Yeah, that's good stuff.
I mean, like Wall Street Mastermind aside, it's not even about whether you join Wall Street Mastermind or not. What we're talking about now is like how you make decisions. It's decision making frameworks.
Yeah.
It's like how do you evaluate the decisions that are in front of you, and every time you get to a fork in the road, how do you decide whether you want to go left or go right? And a lot of times, depending on which road you take, you end up in very different destinations. Right.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I think decision making abilities one of the most important things that you can develop. But anyway, I've gone on for too long. I apologize, but
No, this is good. This is good stuff.
this I'm just like very happy that we got to kind of share your story with everyone. I guess like to just to wrap things up, do you have like one piece of advice for people who are maybe like people who are just going through this process now,
Mm-hmm.
maybe the similar profile as you, you were in their
Mm-hmm.
shoes not too long ago, and they're feeling a little bit lost, they don't know where to start, like is there one piece of advice that someone gave you along the way that just really helped you tremendously? It could have been one of
Yeah.
your mentors, whatever, doesn't matter, alumni from school, like anything like
Mm-hmm.
that you think you want to share with people.
Yeah, I think what comes to mind is my mentor gives me this quote from time to time. He says, we know the cost of everything, but the value of nothing.
Mm.
We know the cost of it. We know exactly how much everything costs, but what value does it offer? And I just try to highlight, when I talk about Wall Street Mastermind, I try to highlight, listen, where I came from. Listen, I don't have any financial services background. I don't come from a family where I'm even exposed to these types of things.
Yeah.
So Wall Street Mastermind gave me the full blueprint. Hey, this is how you do it. And that's priceless. Not every school is going to give you that. Not every mentor is going to give you that. So if you can get that in one place, you're going to be head and shoulders above your competition, because everybody wants to do investment banking. Everybody wants your job that you're aspiring for too. And the results that I've gotten they're off the charts. They're off the charts. Where you have to turn down bulge bracket investment banking opportunities, man, that's a good position to be in. And it's not me, man. It's not me. I always point to this when I talk to Sam. I always point to his system. You're going to have to put the work in, of course. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to commit the time. You're going to have to prioritize. You're going to have to make an investment. But listen, I'm going to make almost 5 times my base salary that I was making as a classification officer. First year on the job. I think that's a pretty good exchange there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what better investment could you have made that would have gotten you that type of returns, right?
I have no idea.
Bitcoin. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But no, I love that quote. We know the cost of everything, but we know the value of nothing. I think that's just another really great way of, kind of saying the same thing that I was saying, which is people always look at the cost. They look at like what the initial investment is, but they're not thinking about the potential return. I mean, they're not thinking about like, okay, what's the upside? What am I getting in return for making this investment, right? And so you got to look at both at the same time. But I think, dude, you give us too much credit. You said like it's not you, it is you. I always tell people that we work with, it's like a relationship between an athlete and a coach. When an athlete wins the championship, like who do we give most of the credit to? We give it to the athlete. right? Of course, the coach has a part to play in it too. The coach's job is to, give you the right game plan, do the right drills
Mm-hmm.
with you during practice, help you scout out the opponents and like just like tell you like, hey, this is what you need to execute on. But like if the athlete doesn't show up in the gym, the athlete doesn't put in the work, the athlete doesn't, step out during game time and like actually execute on the game plan that we laid out
Mm-hmm.
together, and doesn't like actually hit the game-winning shot,
Yeah.
then you're not going to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the same coach. I mean, shoot, look at Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. For the longest time, people were like, "Oh, who deserves more of the credit for Patriots winning all those championships?" Well, now we know, right? Because guess what? Tom left, and Bill's not winning anything.
Yeah.
Bill's still a great coach, but
Mm-hmm.
like, guess what? Tom deserves most of the credit. So I'm just saying,
Mm-hmm.
you're being too humble. I think like you deserve most of the credit. You put in the work. Yes, we gave you the blueprint, but if you didn't do anything with the blueprint, then you wouldn't be where you are today, right? And it's funny you mentioned about having to turn down offers at Bulge Bracket Banks. I remember asking like, "Are you sure you really want to turn down an offer from Bank of America?" And I was like, "Are you sure about that, Kevin?" And it's like, but I mean, hey, like, look, it is you already had a great offer from UBS, and you honored your commitment to the firm, and I respect that. And I think both are
Mm-hmm.
great firms, and I know you're going to do well at either places. So I'm just excited to see what's ahead of you, man. And obviously, I'm sure you'll keep me posted on that, and we'll continue to work together. But guys, for those of you that are still listening, I mean, this has been one of our longer interviews, so I'm gonna probably wrap things up here. But if you are in a similar situation, maybe as where Kevin was, maybe you're not like the prototypical candidate. You didn't go to an Ivy League school. You don't have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of like friends or family, or even just classmates in school who are trying to do what you're trying to do, was namely get into investment banking. Like you don't find yourself, you don't feel like you're in the correct environment right now that's going to allow you to really just bring out the best version of yourself, then I want to encourage you to reach out. Like book what you can actually do is book a free virtual coffee chat with a successful Wall Street Mastermind alumni first. Okay, so you could talk to one of our students that have gone through recruiting already, gotten an offer from one of these top tier banks, and you can talk to them and get their recruiting advice, hear about their experience. You can ask them about Wall Street Mastermind if you want, or you don't have to. But after you talk to them, if you feel like, hey, like Wall Street Mastermind is something that I'm interested in, then they can help you set up a chat with our team, and we can talk more and see how we might be able to help you. But like even if you talk to the alumni and you decide like, no, this is not something that's really for me, that's totally cool too. Then you just get like a free networking call or whatever, and no harm, no foul, and hopefully it helps you out, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you're interested in doing that, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we'll get you on the calendar with one of our alums, and then we can take it from there. All right. So, guys, we're going to wrap things up here. That'll be it for today. Kevin, I want to thank you again for taking so much time to talk to us. We went way over time for what I expected. So I apologize for that. But
Oh, it's good.
I always enjoy talking to you. So I kind of knew it might run long, given the dynamics between the two of us. But
Mm-hmm.
I think this would be really, I think this is a really inspirational story for a lot of our listeners, and hopefully it helps some people out there to just, at a minimum, have more belief in themselves that they can do this as long as they have the right blueprint and the right action plan. All right, so guys, that'll be it for today.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk soon. All right.